Lately, it seems we're surrounded by messages about gut health and the gut-brain axis. But is this connection just wellness hype, good for attracting attention and likes on social media? Or is there actual evidence in humans that the activities of your digestive tract are connected to your mental health and well-being? I caught up with two scientists currently working in the field of the microbiota-gut-brain axis to answer the question, will better gut health improve my mental health? So let's start by learning about gut-brain anatomy from Professor Aletta Kraneveld, a pharmacologist at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. From outside your body, it's kind of hard to tell how the gut and the brain are connected. So what's going on?
Basically, I believe there are three anatomical connections. The first one is the neuronal one. You have your neurons in your intestinal tract, which is regarded to as the enteric nervous system, which can signal to the brain or that can be signaled to from the brain. Then you have the vagal nerve, which connects the upper part of our intestinal tract, of the intestines to the brainstem. And then we have the sympathetic nerves and the pelvic nerve that signal to the spinal cord. The second anatomic connection is our circulation. Blood vessels from the intestinal tract can in the whole system reach the brain, and there you have the blood-brain barrier, which is protecting the brain from components in the circulation. And a third connection anatomically is the lymphatic system, all your lymph vessels.
These lymph vessels are a key part of the immune system. And up until recently, scientists thought that the lymphatic system was totally separate from the brain. But in 2015, a paper published in the scientific journal Nature showed that the lymph vessels were found right within the brain. This illustrated the close connection that did exist between the immune system and the brain. So there have been these recent exciting discoveries about the anatomy. But how long have scientists known that a connection existed between the gut and the brain?
Well, pretty long. As almost 2,000 years ago, Hippocrates already stated all diseases begin in the gut, so also diseases from the brain. But in regards to the gut-brain connection, this was also already recognized by scientists and doctors in the 18th and the 19th century. An example is the French anatomist Bichat, who discovered the enteric nervous system and recognized the connection between emotion and the gut. Then we have the famous professor at Columbia, professor of pathology, Michael Gershon. He is regarded as the father of the neurogastroenterology, and he published his book at the end of the 20th century, which is called The Second Brain, and he regards our enteric nervous system as the second brain. And then the last 15 years, research really focused and moved to the microbes living in our gut and how they can influence the brain. And the reason is pretty simple, because we have all these elegant new omic techniques, which is much easier to assess the composition and even the activity of microbes in the intestines, as compared to the old days where you had to culture all your bacteria. And most of the bacteria in the gastrointestinal tract are pretty difficult to culture. But now we can have a close look at the DNA and thereof make an estimate of the composition of the microbes.
So this is where the microbes come in. Now, the digestive tract is complex, and microbes are not the only part of gut health, of course, but as a living community inside of us, coating every surface of our digestive tract, they seem to be an important part of how we maintain gut health. Professor Jane Foster, a neuroscientist and molecular biologist at McMaster University in Canada, explains what these microbes are.
So microbiota include all the bacteria, the viruses, the fungi, the protozoa, even parasites. And they cover all of the surface of your body. But if we just consider the bacterial component of the microbiome, there are 100 trillion gut bacteria. But altogether, these microbial cells are actually greater in number than all our eukaryotic cells in our body.
These eukaryotic cells are your cells with your human DNA. So if genetic information were written down in books, let's say, the library of genetic information from the bacteria that inhabit your body would be far bigger than the library of genetic information from your human body. How did scientists discover the importance of these bacteria in how the brain functions?
I think that if we fast forward to the last decade, the importance of microbes themselves as part of gut-brain connection is really what's expanded across brain science, including neuroscientists, psychiatrists, psychologists, neurologists. And the development of this research really started in stress biology. And so there's these key brain regions such as our hypothalamus, our amygdala, and our hippocampus. And these seem to be the centers that are very responsive to stress. And they also seem to be the essential regions where our microbes communicate with our brain. Beyond those regions, there's a lot of other brain regions and a lot of brain systems that seem to be influenced also by the microbiome.
Scientists use preclinical models, that's everything from petri dish systems to mice, to figure out the mechanics of how the gut microbes influence the brain. What's the evidence in humans that the microbes of the gut can indeed change aspects of the brain?
So evidence that microbes influences the brain in people has been generated from a whole host of different approaches. One approach that people have used for many years is actually to look at the impact of administration of probiotics in healthy individuals. And there's a collection of these studies over time that demonstrate a positive impact from these probiotics on both stress hormones and on mood symptoms. So this is indirect evidence that, good bacteria can influence the brain. There have also been some imaging studies in healthy individuals. And in these studies, they've actually looked at the composition of gut microbiota in healthy individuals and looked at how some specific profiles of bacteria and differences in bacterial taxa are linked to changes in brain anatomy and in brain wiring. So again, linking by association the presence of certain bacteria with a brain circuit. And then finally, in clinical cohorts where there's a lot of data emerging, we know that in many different studies that compare healthy volunteers to individuals with psychiatric disorders, that there's differences both in microbiota composition as well as function in these individuals. As we move forward using higher resolution tools, we can associate some of these changes in the microbiome with aspects of these disorders, including disease severity, certain symptoms, or whether or not an individual might respond to a treatment.
We also know that diet shapes gut microbes. So aside from those one-time indulgences, we know overall diet pattern shapes our microbial community. Can shifting our overall diet change our brains?
We need to invest to gain more evidence, but there are dietary association studies, for example, the studies with the Mediterranean diet performed by Felice Jacka in Australia, which really shows an improvement in mental health in patients diagnosed with depression. We really need to work much harder to get more evidence in humans that there is a link and that we can manipulate our microbes that affect our mental health.
If you adhere to the Mediterranean diet, you eat lots of fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, fish, and some dairy products. And this is in contrast to the so-called Western diet, which is high in fat and sugar. It sounds like it's very complex to unravel interactions between diet, environment, and the gut microbes already living in your gut. So keeping in mind that this is not by any means medical advice, what can people do now?
Follow the general guidelines of healthy food. For instance, in the Netherlands, less than, I think, 5% is eating according to the national food guidelines, which are really based on Mediterranean diet. Maybe we should move towards a more personalized perspective, where we try to establish first the microbiome of a person before starting to do intervention and targeting the microbiome. Because I think you can probably, if we get more knowledge, design personalized diets or personalized supplements to target the intestinal microbes in a person suffering from mental health problems. Your microbiome is completely different from my microbiome. So it's like a fingerprint. And I think we should not be afraid to embrace the complexity of the fingerprint and thereby design interventions targeting parts of the fingerprints which might be involved in mental health problems.
So overall, it seems like the microbes in our digestive tracts are one aspect of our overall gut health. And we have various types of evidence emerging that these microbes do have the potential to influence our mental health and well-being. But we need to know more about which specific microbes have which specific effects, or how we can shift the entire microbial community in a way to have the brain effects we want. This is science writer Kristina Campbell reporting from My Mind, Mood and Microbes. Stay tuned for more videos and special events.